Josiah Henson was born into slavery in 1789 in Maryland, at a time when the American dream was built on the broken bodies of enslaved people, and from the very beginning his life was shaped by violence, separation, and survival. When he was just a child, he watched his father whipped nearly to death for resisting a white overseer and then sold away forever. And shortly after that, Josiah himself was beaten so brutally that his jaw was permanently damaged, a scar he would carry for the rest of his life as a reminder of what slavery truly was beneath its polite justifications. As he grew older, Henson proved to be intelligent, disciplined, and deeply moral, traits that ironically made him valuable to slaveholders who used his strength and leadership to control other enslaved people, placing him in a painful position where survival often meant enforcing rules he hated, a role that haunted him with guilt for years. Despite this, Henson held on to faith and education, secretly teaching himself to read and write, believing knowledge was the only weapon slavery could not fully take away. His master repeatedly promised him freedom in exchange for loyalty and years of hard labor. A promise that Henson trusted with heartbreaking hope, even handing over his life savings toward his own emancipation, only to discover the cruel truth that the papers granting his freedom were intentionally altered to keep him enslaved forever. This betrayal shattered any remaining belief he had in the moral conscience of the slave system, and it became the moment that transformed him from a man hoping for justice into one determined to seize freedom by any means necessary. Risking everything, Josiah Henson escaped north through the brutal, dangerous network later known as the Underground Railroad, traveling at night, hiding by day. Hunted not only by slave catchers but by laws that declared him property rather than human, until he finally crossed into Canada, a place that represented something almost mythical to enslaved people: true freedom protected by law. In Canada, Henson did not disappear quietly into freedom, but instead became a leader, founding a settlement for escaped slaves, building schools, churches, and farms so others could rebuild the lives slavery tried to destroy. And unlike the fictional image later associated with his name, Henson was not passive or submissive. He was strategic, resilient, outspoken, and unafraid to confront the system that had brutalized him. His life story eventually reached Harriet Beecher Stowe, whose famous novel Uncle Tom's Cabin shocked America and fueled abolitionist sentiment. But the character of Uncle Tom, softened and altered for white audiences, stripped away much of Henson's strength, turning him into a symbol that was later misunderstood and even mocked, while the real man behind the story remained largely forgotten. What history rarely tells is that Josiah Henson met presidents, advised abolitionists, and spoke publicly about the horrors of slavery at a time when doing so invited threats and violence, and yet even after emancipation, the pain of slavery followed him as he watched America struggle to accept black freedom, dignity, and equality. Henson lived long enough to see slavery legally abolished. But he also lived long enough to understand that freedom on paper did not erase generations of trauma, injustice, and silence. His story matters not because it inspired a famous book, but because it exposes the truth behind a nation that taught morality while practicing cruelty, a system that claimed Christianity while destroying families, and a history that remembered fictional characters while forgetting real survivors. Josiah Henson was not Uncle Tom as caricatured by later generations. He was a man who endured the worst of America's past and still chose to build something better, and the fact that so few people know his real story is not an accident, but a reminder that history often hides its most uncomfortable truths behind simplified legends, leaving it to later generations to finally listen to the voices that were once forced into silence.